Would you take the dream job? $1 million apartment in New York? No parents, one job, taking care of a lovely, peaceful baby. It sounded perfect. But what if the silence of the house started watching you? What if the baby's toys turned on by themselves, without any batteries in them? What if this door, the closet door in the bedroom, opened and closed by itself, and the baby, instead of crying, smiled at the darkness that lived inside? I thought I was being hired to protect an innocent child. The truth was much sicker. I wasn't the first person in that house, and the diary I found hidden under the floorboards proved that what haunted that room wasn't a ghost. It was a deal. The parents knew everything, and the thing that lived in the closet just needed a new playmate. Today, I'm going to tell you what really went on in that apartment. The interview had been a cold, almost surgical formality. The Caldwells, owners of the sumptuous apartment that overlooked Central Park like a concrete tan glass hawk, didn't seem interested in my qualifications or my practiced smile. Their eyes, an icy gray and identical, probed me with an intensity that suggested they were looking for something more than a babysitter for little Leo. They were looking, perhaps, for an absence of questions, an ability to become part of the expensive, silent furniture. And I, desperately needing the job, offered them exactly that, a complacent vacuum. My name is Ethan. I'm 24, with a stalled degree in literature and the perennial feeling that adulthood is a party to which I wasn't invited. That apartment, with its aseptic minimalism and its artworks that seemed to scream in silence, was a universe apart from my cramped Bushwick studio. The baby, Leonardo, was the only source of warmth in that modern mausoleum. A little angel with rosy cheeks and curious eyes who seemed to absorb the world with a gravity unusual for his 8-month-old age. The parents, Richard and Beatrice, were spectral figures in their own home. They left before sunrise and returned long after the silhouettes of the skyscrapers lit up against the night. They left instructions on hastily handwritten notes and the money via bank transfer. My interaction with them was minimal, which at first seemed like a blessing. It was me, Leo, and the silence. A vast, heavy silence that filled the rooms like an invisible fog, and when things have no explanation. This question, once a philosophical curiosity at a bar, became the axis on which my sanity began to spin dangerously. It began subtly, treacherously, a cold breath on the back of my neck while I was sterilizing baby bottles in the kitchen, even with all the windows hermetically sealed. A fleeting figure in the periphery of my vision, which I always attributed to fatigue or the reflection on one of the countless polished surfaces. I felt watched, a primordial sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand on end and made me look over my shoulder every few minutes. But I ignored it. I had to ignore it. The first undeniable event occurred on a rainy Tuesday. New York City was crying outside, a gray, incessant cry. Leo slept in his crib, in the room that had been designed to be a children's sanctuary, with painted clouds on the ceiling and a slowly rotating mobile of felt planets. I was sitting in the chair next to it, reading a book under the yellow light of a lamp. The only sound was the rain and the baby's soft breathing. Then, from across the room, a laugh. It wasn't human laughter. It was a distorted, high-pitched electronic cackle coming from the toy box. My heart leaped and lodged in my throat. I looked at the box. Amid the wooden cubes and stuffed animals, a plastic clown with a painted smile that had always seemed sinister to me stood with his eyes flashing red lights. He laughed and laughed and laughed. A laugh programmed to be cheerful, but in this context, it sounded like the soundtrack to a nightmare. I stood up, my legs shaking. I walked over to the box, my hands hesitating before diving in among the toys. I grabbed the clown. There was no visible on button, just a battery compartment screwed into the back. The laughter stopped the moment my fingers touched the cold plastic. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. I unscrewed the lid with my fingernail. The compartment was empty. There were no batteries. I threw the toy back into the box as if it were on fire and ran to the crib, my hand instinctively seeking the protection of Leo's warm, sleeping body. He hadn't moved. The rain beat against the window, indifferent to my growing panic. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the building, every distant siren, seemed like a coded message, a premonition. The events intensified. They became bolder, almost performative, like you're taking care of a little baby, and, out of nowhere, the toys start turning on by themselves, and the closet doors open and close without anyone touching them. It's creepy. It sounds like something out of a ghost, does it? The question from my own subconscious echoed with a macabre irony. The closet in Leo's room was a heavy, white wooden piece with double doors. One afternoon, while I was changing the baby's diaper, I heard the latch click. Slowly, the right door opened, creaking like in a cheap horror movie. I stood there, staring into the darkness inside the cabinet. Then, with a dull thud, it closed, and opened again, and closed. The movement was deliberate, rhythmic, as if an invisible child were playing hide dash and dash seek. This time, Leo saw it. His little eyes followed the movement of the door, and he didn't cry. He smiled. A gummy, innocent smile, directed at the nothingness that moved. That smile terrified me more than the phenomenon itself. Who was he smiling at? I started talking to myself, nervous whispers, as I walked around the apartment, trying to find logical explanations. Air currents, structural failures, electronic interference. I clung to these possibilities like a castaway to a wreck, but deep down in my soul, a cold certainty settled in. I was not alone, and whatever was there, it was focused on Leo, or perhaps on me. Curiosity, that double-edged sword, overcame fear. I began to investigate. The Caldwells were private people, but the digital age leaves traces. I spent hours, after Leo went to sleep, searching through their social media profiles, articles about the law firm, anything. I found little. They were the image of discreet perfection. No close relatives mentioned, no old family photos. It was as if they had appeared out of nowhere, already successful and impeccable. The discovery came from an analog source. One sleepless night, while cleaning the library, a room they never used, full of law and art books that looked like they had never been opened, I noticed an unevenness in the wooden floor beneath the Persian rug. I knelt down, my heart pounding. There was a loose board. Using the tip of a pair of scissors, I managed to pry it up. Underneath, in a small, dusty compartment, was a shoebox. Inside were no shoes, but a pile of faded photographs and a small blue leather-bound diary. The photos showed another family, in another time, a couple with tired smiles, and a boy. A little boy, of maybe 5 or 6, with dark, unruly hair, and a look that was both mischievous and melancholy. In several of the photos, he was in the room that was now Leo's. The decor was different, simpler, but the window, with its view of the park, was unmistakable. The boy was holding a plastic clown with a painted-on smile. The same clown. I opened the diary. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. It was the boy's mother's. The first few pages were filled with love and little anecdotes about her son, whom she called my little Arthur. She described his games, his funny words, his love of trains, and the clown his father had given him. But as I turned the pages, the tone changed. Joy gave way to concern. May 12th. Arthur has been talking to his friend. He says he lives in the closet. At first I thought it was funny, a childish thing. But today he told me that his friend doesn't like it when I come into his room. I shivered. May 23rd. The toys, they move. I swear to God. I left the room tidy, and when I came back, the building blocks had formed a crooked tower in the middle of the carpet. Arthur was in the living room with me. He said, It was Nico, Mommy. He wanted to show you his castle. June 5th. I can't sleep anymore. I hear whispers coming from his room. Sounds that aren't my son's. Richard thinks I'm going crazy, that the pressure is getting to me. Today, the closet door slammed so hard the mirror cracked. Arthur didn't flinch. He just looked at the closet and said, "Nico is angry." The last entry was barely legible, the words blurred by what looked like dried tears. June 14th. He's gone, my boy. The doctor said it was a sudden aneurysm, a fatality. But I know it wasn't. When I found him, he was in his bed, cold, and the closet door was wide open. The clown was standing next to him, his red eyes blinking. Nico took him. He took my son. I closed the diary, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The air in the apartment seemed to grow thicker, colder. Arthur, that boy wasn't a ghost. He was the victim, the entity. The Nico who lived in the closet was still there. And now I had a new potential playmate. Leo. Fear gave way to protective fury. I glanced at the baby monitor on my desk. Leo slept peacefully, oblivious to the dark history that permeated his bedroom walls. The next morning when Beatrice Caldwell came home early, a rare occurrence, I confronted her. I set the shoebox on the marble kitchen table. She looked at the box, then at me, and her face, normally a mask of control, fell. The gray in her eyes seemed to darken. "Where did you find this?" Her voice was a thread. "You knew," I said, my voice low but firm. "You knew about this apartment, about what happened here." Richard walked into the kitchen at that moment, drawn by our voices. He saw the box and his body stiffened. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the hum of the stainless steel refrigerator. It was Beatrice who spoke, the words coming out like shards of glass. "We had no choice. We were in debt. A distant relative passed away and left us this apartment. It was already furnished. When we found out about the pro story, it was too late. We tried to sell it, but the things that happen here, they scare people. No one stays for long." "And Leo?" I asked, incredulous. "You put him in the same room." "We brought in priests, mediums, experts," Richard said, his voice hoarse. "They said the energy is concentrated there, that it's an ancient, territorial entity, and that it calms down with the presence of a child. It feeds on energy, on innocence. As long as it has something to play with, it remains contained." The monstrosity of those words hit me like a punch. They weren't just living in a haunted apartment. They were offering their own child as a silent sacrifice, a lightning rod of innocence to keep an evil force at bay. The nannies, like me, were just disposable guardians in this sick arrangement. "She didn't physically hurt Arthur," Beatrice whispered, as if that were an excuse. "His death was a tragic coincidence." That's what we told ourselves. At that moment, a sound echoed down the hallway from Leo's room. It wasn't the clown's laughter or the creaking of the closet. It was a soft melody, the lullaby of the planet Mobile. But I was wrong. The melody played backwards, the notes distorted into a dissonant and deeply disturbing cacophony. The three of us looked at each other, horror written all over our faces. I ran ahead. The bedroom door was open. The mobile was spinning wildly over the crib. Leo was sitting up, not crying. He was looking up at the felt planets and reaching out with his little hands toward something I couldn't see. And in the corner of the room, near the closet, the darkness seemed denser, more concentrated. A stain in the air, a silhouette that the light didn't dare touch. I felt a chill that came from within, a fear that froze my blood and my soul. It wasn't the presence of a ghost child. It was something much older, and it was hungry. I didn't say goodbye. That night, while the Caldwells argued in venomous whispers in the living room, I packed my few things in silence. I went to Leo's room one last time. The melody had stopped. The baby was asleep. I placed a kiss on his warm, soft forehead. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I took the plastic clown from the toy box. His painted eyes seemed to follow me. I went down the service elevator, the doll hidden in my bag, its weight seeming disproportionate to its size. As I crossed the sumptuous lobby, I didn't look back. I walked through the New York night, the humid air sticking to my skin. In the first manhole I came across on Lexington Avenue, I dropped the clown into the fetid darkness. I don't know why I took him. Maybe it was a futile attempt to take part of the curse with me, to lighten Leo's burden for just a moment. Today, I live in another state. I work in a bookstore. Sometimes, when a child laughs out loud, or a toy falls off a shelf, my heart races and the cold of that apartment comes back to haunt me. I think of Leo, smiling into the void. I think of the Caldwells, trapped in their golden cage with their pet demon, and I wonder who the next babysitter will be, the next to feel the cold breath on the back of his neck, the next to try to find an explanation for things that simply don't exist. And I pray that he, unlike me, won't be curious. I ran away. I left my job, the city, and I tried to leave that house behind. But the truth is, you never leave a place like that. It seeps into you. Ethan escaped, but the story didn't end with him. It continues, night after night, in that apartment overlooking the park. The sick cycle the Caldwells created continues. Leo, the baby, probably has a new babysitter now. Someone who might ignore the cold breath on the back of his neck, who might try to rationalize the toys that turn on by themselves. The question that haunts me to this day is not what he saw. It's what's happening now. Who's smiling at the dark? And whatever feeds on that innocence. ... Is it satisfied? Perhaps the worst part of all this is knowing that the world is full of closed doors and secrets like the Caldwells. Stories that hide behind perfect facades. Sounds we hear in the night and choose to ignore. If you, like me, believe that not every shadow is just a shadow, subscribe to the channel. Here, we open those doors and hear the whispers in the dark. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next investigation, because evil, believe me, has many, many faces. And now, I want to hear from you. Leave your comment below. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Would you have confronted his parents and risked everything? Or just run away to save your own skin, like he did? Be honest. While you think about your answer, another story is appearing on your screen. The story is different, the place is different, but the chills, I guarantee, it's the same. Click and continue in the dark with me. See you there.